Good afternoon, Indira, and how are you doing?
Afternoon, Prof. I'm doing quite well, and how are you?
Fine, thank you, Indira. Now, Indira, I just want to break the news. AOSIS has decided to promote an article that has received the most citations during the 4-year period, January 2020 until December 2023. Indira, the following article has won the award. The impact of inequality and COVID-19 on education and career planning for South African children of rural and low socioeconomic backgrounds. Now listen, this is an objective evaluation assessment of the article, and that would be your article. Hearty congratulations, this is an outstanding achievement. So early in your career, wow, academic and private practice career, this is truly amazing. I'm immensely proud of you, Indira. Well done.
Thank you so much, Prof. I'm thrilled for this opportunity and this achievement. It's really such a privilege to have published in the African Journal of Career Development, but also to have achieved this award, and like you say, so early in my career. So I'm quite grateful for that.
Thank you so much. I hope after this meeting, this insert will enter your CV, and you'll build that CV. Is going to be an impeccable one, and I cannot wait to see how your career trajectory unfolds. So thank you for accepting our invitation to be interviewed to discuss your article remotely. Can you give us a brief overview of your research and its main findings, please, Indira?
Okay, so this article looked at reviewing the relevant literature in order to identify themes of factors that impacted career development of young people, specifically in South Africa and more specifically in disadvantaged communities. This research was started through an opportunity for me to present some thoughts at an Unequal Worlds conference that was sponsored by the United Nations, and in that presentation, what we looked at was South Africa as, at that point, the most unequal country in the world. And just in preparation for this interview, I went back and looked at the current statistics, and South Africa is still at the top of that list. So I think that is quite alarming. But in this research, what I had found was there were several factors that influenced the career development in these disadvantaged communities. The first one being the extreme distances that children have to cover in order to gain access to quality education, and I'm saying quality in quite a limited way, because if we compare the quality of education in high-income communities as opposed to rural communities, there is quite a vast difference. And if we think about the distances covered, by the time children get to school, plus minus 16 Ks a day just to get to school, they're quite tired. There's quite a bit of fatigue that they're experiencing. And to expect them to maintain that attention and concentration and able to learn in those conditions is quite unfair. Secondly, we looked at the inequalities that girls have to face specifically in rural communities, and that specifically pertaining to girls who don't have access to sanitary products. I think statistics show that they miss approximately 60 days in the school year, and I think that is quite appalling, in that besides the possible disadvantage and lagging behind in their academic career, there's a whole host of other factors that influence that. Their self-esteem, their self-development, all of that is greatly impacted, and as a result, it hinders their opportunities. The next factor we looked at was school infrastructure, things like poor building infrastructure, lack of functioning equipment, lack of desks, poor sanitation. I think additionally to that, we looked at some schools still having put toilets as their way of sanitation. And it was quite appalling to see in April this year, a 3-year-old child had drowned in one of those pit toilets. So it's quite upsetting to see that 30 years after democracy, where there were all of these promises made by the democratic government and little has changed. And the children in South Africa are the ones that suffer. I think additionally, if I can just wrap up, there were several factors that were included, and that was the impact COVID-19 had on the way in which education continued. And if we look at high income communities, they were able to transition to online learning and teaching quite efficiently, while in rural communities that was almost impossible. That was not even thought of because of the lack of access to devices, lack of access to stable internet connections. People's priorities were food security and safety and shelter rather than buying devices that could assist in education purposes. I think these are some of the factors that were quite upsetting to me when doing this research review, and I think that was why it was so important to highlight it in this article.
Thank you kindly, Indira. Indira, on to our second question. What inspired you to pursue this particular research topic?
So I think I mentioned it in the start. There was this opportunity to present at the Unequal Worlds Conference. And I think just based on that, I had to do some reflection on my own academic journey. And I was fortunate enough to attend quite an average school in the public sector, and through my education and academic career, my parents kept reminding me of children who didn't have the same opportunities, of their struggles during the apartheid struggle. It became so ingrained in me that the type of education I had was almost a luxury that other children had not had. And I think while I did mention that I am an intern in clinical psychology currently, my background is in medical anthropology. And from looking at social and societal structures and the challenges that may pose on medical or healthcare issues rather, and now educational difficulties, I think that motivated me to look more into this topic. I think also just wanting to motivate other young individuals like myself who are coming into the career, who need to use these advantages that we have to advocate for those who don't have that opportunity.
Thanks very much, Indira. So true. What were some of the key challenges you faced during your research, and how did you overcome them?
I think for this research, there were very minimal difficulties that I experienced. I think because it was a research review, methodological challenges were quite minimal. But one that I can say was quite frustrating was the lack of access to full text articles. I think during this research endeavor and subsequent research endeavors, it has become quite difficult to gain access to articles that could potentially provide quite enlightening information, but just not having access to it.
Thanks very much, Indira. Indira, how do you believe your findings will impact your field of study and or the broader scientific community?
So that I'm hoping that there will be more work done in this area, because we also need to convince governments in our country that we need to prioritize education above all else, and prioritize education of young people, especially those living in poverty. I think research has shown that poverty does lead to future generations continuing that cycle, and it's quite hard to break through it unless there is quite a strong foundation and stability within educational opportunities and employment opportunities. And I think also, just adding to that, inspiring younger psychology and anthropology students and young professionals to again advocate for people who don't have that voice or don't have the ability to advocate for themselves.
Many thanks. And you were expecting this question. How does publishing in an open access journal benefit your research and its dissemination?
So I'm not quite as experienced as you, Prof, but I think that one of the benefits of open access journals is making it easier for us as students and young academics to have access to relevant and necessary work. And I think one of the good things about open access journals was that during COVID, well, not just open access journals, but other journals as well, during COVID, all articles published during that time was made free by most journals, and it was quite useful.
Well said, thank you, Indira. Now, my second last question. What do you hope readers will take away from your article?
So I'm hoping that readers will engage in the social injustices that we are experiencing in this country and elsewhere around the world. I think in addition to the harm that was done at individual and community levels, inequality has the potential to destabilize not just our country, but multiple countries across the world. But more specifically in South Africa, if we look at the 2021 civil unrest in KZN and parts of Gauteng, I think that, including COVID-19 pandemic, we need to be prepared for what's to come. And I think that's because we don't have the luxury to not be prepared at this point. We need to ensure the next time that this happens, there is continued access for children to continue school, to continue developing, to continue developing this country.
Thank you very much, Indira. Indira, one more question for today, please. What are the next steps for your research? And are there any exciting developments on the horizon?
So, in fact, I have continued the research in the area of COVID-19, specifically looking at how psychologists have coped and adapted to rendering psychotherapy on an online platform during the initial stages of the pandemic. So far, there have been several challenges that have been identified, but I think what was quite important to recognize was many psychotherapists, psychologists have noted the resilience of themselves, their adaptability to these new circumstances, and that they and patients coped quite well to this change. I think it is quite an important avenue to look into, because this might be the future of psychotherapy, allowing for less travel time, less costs. So I think this could be the future of psychotherapy.
Indira, Thank you sincerely for your thoughtful and insightful responses to each question. Your overview of the research, from its inspiration and challenges to its potential impact on the field, was particularly illuminating. It conveyed both your dedication and the substantial significance of your findings. Your reflections on the benefits of open access publishing and your hopes for reader engagement underscore the importance of making research accessible and meaningful to a broad audience, especially as you highlighted during times such as COVID-19 stint. We also appreciate your enthusiasm, so inspiring, about future directions and the promising developments on the horizon. These add an exciting dimension to your work. Indira, thank you so much once more for sharing your journey and perspectives with us. And all the very best with your exciting future. For you, the sky is not the limit. I wish you only the very best, and I intend to follow your career trajectory with a great deal of interest. All the very best.
Thank you so much, Prof. I appreciate that.